today, assessment tools and techniques. This is part of our fall workshop series for the certificate in second language studies. And as we always say, everyone is welcome. If you're interested in the certificate program, graduate students, contact Elyse, contact myself, or contact Patrick Murphy. Maybe we could all just wave to identify ourselves here. And Elyse, since I'm sharing the screen, I cannot see who's coming in. So if you could let people in, that would be really helpful. Today we'll hear from Language Program Director in Portuguese, Dr. Benjamin Legg, Elyse Petit, LPD in French, and myself, LPD in German.
I'm sorry, Silke, to interrupt, but yeah. I cannot let people in because you have the hand.
Okay, I apologize. I haven't worked with the waiting room before.
It's all right. I should not have setting. The...
Okay.
Okay, I reclaim the host, and I can do.
And you can do the PowerPoint?
No, because I don't have it. Oh yes, I do.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Do you want to go ahead and do that? I think that we don't have anyone left waiting right now.
Okay,
so I think that we'll just get started and we'll do as we planned. Okay.
Okay. Sorry, guys.
Okay. All right. Let's start again. So. Yes. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about assessments. I think during this pandemic, we've all had to shift gears quite a bit as language teachers and learn new skills, learn how to teach online, either on Zoom, hybrid, asynchronously. We've spent lots and lots of time on this. And I think the silver lining, though, is that we've made a lot of improvements to our courses that will remain after the pandemic is over. And one of the main things, at least for me, that I've improved in the German program is assessment. In fact, I supervise 4 courses, so I feel like I'm just nonstop writing assessments. But it's great and long overdue, really, to do an assessment-based program. So I'm going to be talking about, just introducing us to some terms: testing versus assessment, and formative and summative assessment. Then we'll break out into breakout rooms for a little bit to talk about our own experience with those things. I'll also talk about rubrics, just define those terms. Ben will talk about then integrated performance assessment, and I'll be giving some examples. Then again, we'll break out. This is a workshop, so we'll break out into breakout rooms and discuss. And Elyse will talk about portfolios, and we'll do the same. We'll break out and discuss. And then we'll have some time. This is a 1.5-hour workshop, so we've kind of broken it up so that we can all actively participate and also have some questions, answers at the end. So I'll begin with testing versus assessment. So when we think of kind of very traditionally of assessment, we might think of paper and pencil testing, midterms, final exams. We can't do that in an online course. We can't really do that in a hybrid course. You know, scholars have really been questioning how useful this approach is. So traditionally, one might write a syllabus to cover the, I don't know, first 5 chapters of the book, structure the units and plan the daily lessons accordingly, and then give a test. So teach, test, and hope for the best. I did not make that up, but I like it because it really kind of pushes us to think more in a backwards design kind of way, all right? To start with the learning objectives. What do we want our students to be able to do at the end of the course? Then design assessments, rubrics, modules, learning activities, always with that goal, that learning objective in mind. So I'll just briefly define the types of assessments that we're talking about. And the first is formative assessment. So this is a low stakes assessment. So an assessment where I might give a completion grade if it's done completely and fairly well. And it happens during the unit. So it's kind of a check-in, both for the students and for the instructor. So for the students to say, what have I learned? What do I need to still work on? For the instructor to say, oh, wait a minute, if all my students can't do this skill, then that tells me I need to change something about my instruction. So it's kind of goes both ways. The instructor can give immediate feedback, and the students can also self-assess, as I just mentioned, to say, okay, I really need to work on this aspect. So this is just an example of a speaking assessment here that I did on Flipgrid. And this is on the third day of beginning German. And so the students are simply doing some very simple introductions, and then they're recording a video in response, just greeting their fellow students. Okay. So this can be done, of course, throughout and at all levels. This is a very, very, very simple example. And an example of kind of self-assessment might be this. There's no grade here. There's just, what did I do well? What do I need to work on? Okay, so vocabulary, language control, pronunciation, fluency, the content. So all these categories, of course, the assessment I showed was quite simple, but all these categories become much more relevant when we get to more complex language and is a more upper level. So that's formative assessment. You're learning by doing the assessment, and you're learning how well you master the material. Summative assessment would be then at the end of a unit, at the end of a module. It's a more high stakes assessment. It's graded. It's a larger part of the grade. And it allows the student to evaluate, the instructor to evaluate student learning. So students really showcase what they learned. So like I talked to my intermediate German students today about this upcoming assessment. They're using, this is kind of the culmination of everything we've done, right? So they have these questions that are on the speaking assessment have been discussed in class. They've written journals about them. They've investigated films and texts, and now they're showcasing what they've learned in the unit. The students also have access to these rubrics, so they know kind of how is this being evaluated? What should I, what's important here? Make sure to answer all the questions. Pay attention to my vocabulary and so on. These, of course, as most of you know, look like this on Brightspace, where when we're evaluating as instructors, we simply click on language control. Okay, some errors, I click on that. Okay, and then I can give some more specific feedback as well. Pronunciation, I click on excellent effort, and so on. So formative during the unit monitors learning, and summative evaluates the learning of the students. So we wanted to stop there for the first time and break out into breakout groups to ask this question and have people share in a smaller group. What are some summative and formative assessments that you've used in your teaching practice, or are thinking of using, or will use? Challenges that you've had, anything at all with formative and summative assessments. So I will put us into breakout rooms, and we'll have 3 rooms, and I believe, let's see, Ben, Elyse. Okay, and I will join one of the rooms as well. So we'll take about 7 minutes or so, just time since it's on the Zoom here, just so you know what to expect. We'll take about 7 minutes or so to share from our own teaching practice. Thank you. Yeah, welcome back, everyone. I hope you're able to share some useful ideas. I always find it really useful to hear what other people are doing. We talked a lot about quizzes and how to do quizzes, so that was interesting. I'm going to turn it over to Benjamin Legg, who's going to be talking about integrated performance assessments. Go ahead.
Yes. Hello, everybody. So yeah, and I guess I'll just say kind of slide when I'm ready to move ahead. So integrated performance assessments, task-based assessment of student communication skills. And I include this picture as a backdrop because it's beautiful, and also because it's something that you could use in an integrated performance assessment, and we'll talk about that as we move on. So slide. But I guess until then, let me introduce myself. I am a program director for Portuguese, and yeah, and I've been slowly moving to an IPA, integrated performance assessment model, over the past 2 years, and this shift to distance and online learning has just cemented that. And we can talk about that more in small groups. But anyway, the IPA prototype was developed by ACTFL with help from a Department of Education grant, and they focus on assessing learner achievement level. So novice, intermediate, or advanced, those are the levels that ACTFL ACTFL has put together in the 3 different modes of communication. So interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational. Is everybody familiar with that language before I move on? Do you need me to jog that? I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding, so good. And while IPAs are designed to assess performance of specific communicative modes, they are meant to incorporate the 5 C's: communication, culture, connections, community, and comparisons. Slide. So that is the background. So what are the characteristics of an IPA? It should be designed to fit the learning goals for your unit. Okay, so we're all designing courses and we're calling them modules now, but however you arrange your course, whether it's a thematic unit or a chapter unit, you're designing it to fit the learning goals of that unit, which goes back to something Silke said before about backward design. You know, you want those goals in mind, and then you're designing this back from that. The prototype that ACTFL created is composed of 3 tasks, and each one will elicit a different communicative mode. So the IPA should be organized around a specific theme, and each task should be connected to that theme, and ideally one should scaffold the next. That's really important, this idea of scaffolding. What does that mean? That students are building the base for the next task through their performance of a task. And they should learn through their performance of the IPA. That should be a part of it. You know, you learn something via the assessment. The IPA should use authentic materials and encourage students to seek out other materials. The assessment should be conducted over multiple sessions so that students can receive feedback as they do it. This is a big difference from more traditional testing. This is something, and it's where the integrated comes in, that is happening over the course of your course. So it is something that is not just, oh, today's exam day. It's something that is going to be woven into your course planning. So this is a day where we're going to do this. And you need to think of both your content and linguistic goals when you design the IPA. Okay? There's another major characteristic, but that will come later because it's so important. So next slide, please. So some ideas, these are just ideas that I was thinking of for interpretive tasks, okay? And I'm gonna go through ideas I've had for each thing, and I'm gonna show you some examples of things I've done. So interpretive communication, learners, for novice levels, learners can identify specific information or guess the overall purpose of a brief text that's in, and they are using L1. So the text is in L2, but they will use L1 to give this response. So you're not actually testing their language production, it's their interpretation, all right? So some examples I give: poster, online advertisement, schedule, menu, film, something small and easily digestible. They'll watch a video or listen to a recording and identify key information. via multiple choice or short answer questions. The short answer would be in L1. Once again, a television or radio advertisement, children's television clip, news bulletin, weather forecast, something, once again, small and digestible. For intermediate, this is what I'll show you, something that I really love doing. Have them navigate a web page to find specific information requested by the instructor. Job listings, travel plans, apartment and home listings, you know, schedules of things to do on the weekends, television schedules, and then you can also respond to specific guided questions about that site in L1, or you could use this, you could do a longer video and have the response to the longer video, okay? But I really like something that's active, like where they are using an authentic source to find active material. And I'll show you one of mine that I do later. And then finally, for advanced, students can answer comprehension questions about a longer text they are reading or watching. This could be, you know, in the form of a quiz, some kind of game. It could be something where they record a response journal where you give them prompts for as you're reading, like I want you to comment on these 5 elements of this chapter, and they respond that way, but just something specific. Okay, next slide. For presentational, so in this case, I kind of chose specifically what we did, what one item, which was the menu. So let's say we're working with the menu. The next unit in the next module in my class is food, so I think that's why. So if working with the menu, students can choose an item and describe why they liked it in L2 through writing, video, or an in-class presentation. Okay, so this is just, now they're using the target language and they are, you know, presenting something that came off of this original interpretive task, okay? For intermediate, they could write a text, record a video, or give an in-class presentation in which they reflect more deeply on something featured in the interpretive task. So maybe write a recipe for one of the dishes on the menu, record a video where they're cooking that dish, something that involves more language use than the novice level, but that's still kind of using something that they've garnered from the interpretive task to then present, you know, communicate. And then finally, for the advanced class, have them research and write a text that goes more deeply into history or context. They can create slides or a voiceover PowerPoint about this topic, teach a 10-minute mini class. I was saying, say they choose pizza off the menu, they could research Italian cuisine in Brazil. If they choose feijoada, they can research national dishes as a concept in the Lusophone world. Those are just for Portuguese, but you know, different ideas like this. And let's move on to the interpersonal. So some ideas for interpersonal tasks. They can engage in brief conversations to obtain information present in the interpretive task. Ask what other students would like to order off the menu for novice, right? Like, o que você quer? Eu quero blah, 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 or something like that. And to work with a lot of our reality now, perform this via Flipgrid or via video discussion posts on Brightspace. I'm sure a lot of you have done this kind of thing already. For intermediate, they can engage in longer conversations that reflect real life interactions, a server-customer exchange that goes well versus one that goes poorly, something like that, staying in this restaurant theme. And then finally, or another one, they could collaborate on a shared goal. They cook each other's recipe. Say you did that recipe idea. You know, they have to cook each other's recipe and then they record their reactions or something like that. And then finally, for advanced, they can peer edit and communicate about their research and produce a larger video together. They can engage in a debate on the topic in class or via Zoom. A very controversial topic, Italian versus Brazilian pizza. We could add American pizza to that mix. So, you know, there's all kinds of, there's all kinds of directions. And as you can see, this is kind of up to you. But one really important thing is how you will assess this assessment, how you will evaluate. So let's move on. And this is among the most important traits of an IPA is that they are evaluated by rubrics. So this is not something
Sorry,
where
Ben, can I ask a question?
Please.
Between the presentational, interpretive, and interpersonal, do you have any, are you doing this in order, like the same order, or can you like?
We can talk about that, but I have it kind of varies from module to module.
Yeah.
So if there is a module where I feel like asking a student to talk, so let's say it's family, and asking them to talk about one of their favorite relatives could be a good opening thing to do. So then in that case, the presentational would be the first step. And then they could have an interpersonal thing where they talk to each other or make comparisons between the relatives. And then the interpretive could perhaps involve some kind of like researching a Brazilian family and then drawing further parallels, something like that. But so in other words, no, it doesn't have to be in that order. What I will say though, and I'm talking all about integrated performance assessments. If you go into the real literature on this, this is, when using this language, and especially in K through 12 education and in public education, something that is incredibly standardized. So what I am doing is kind of adapted to the realities of a private institution where we have fewer strict directives to follow when we create these things. If you go online, you will find enormous amounts of examples of IPAs that are designed for K through 12 education. And you will notice they are very, very explicit in what they're telling the student they will be doing and what they're, and I personally find that in the higher ed level, I don't personally like being quite as explicit all the time with my students, but it's something you could do if that's what you wanted to do. Okay?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And I just gave an example of a rubric. Silke already did that. So, you know what a rubric is, but just I can show you a rubric that I used on a recent one. So as you can see, once again, just kind of the levels, the bare minimum they could do, and then, and just the, things. What I like about this rubric I've designed, doing some own self-critique, is that it calculates grades with nuance. It's got a lot of categories and a lot of levels, which means that you can really be nuanced in your calculation of a grade. And it also addresses the language taught in the unit rather than an abstract perfect speaker. And that's something, when we were designing this workshop for you, Elyse and Silke and I were talking about the way we would grade papers as grad students or tests, and it would be like minus 0.25 points for this accent, minus 0.5 points if it's that accent, da, 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 da. And that is a weird kind of, it's not, what we're trying to do is build certain competencies, and, that isn't testing that, it's just testing, did they write without the accent? So, you want to be testing to the language you're teaching rather than to this abstract. Okay, what I could improve, more language specific to the frameworks, right? Try to bring in the language that the actual frameworks have put into this, because those are good frameworks, right? They're things that help us, and they're things that are useful for the students to see. And I know Silke had that, and I think that is a good, practice, okay? And I just can show you an example that I just used and I'm going to be grading this weekend. So you can see one of these I've recently done. So let's move on. So this is, in the background, the website that we used as the interpretive. It's called Trabalha Brasil, but it's an employment website, and we can move on. So the interpretive task, I gave them 2 sites. I had them, and you can see it's written in English. And for the first 2 parts, I want the answers to be in English. I want to know that they are understanding what's going on. So what are the purpose? What would you use them for? Do you want to compare them? Give me some ways that you can filter, right? Seeing if they can decipher the website itself and figure out ways to use it. And then, what are words you understand? What are words you don't understand, right? Like, tell me about the language you know. And then I give them specific tasks. Find a position on site A that meets the following criteria. Does not require a college degree, pays more than 1,500 reais per month, includes benefits beyond salaries, located in the south of Brazil. So these are this is the more specific task they have to do. And what I had them do is just do a screenshot or a link. And then I had a paragraph they had to write in Portuguese that was kind of preparation for the next, this is my scaffolding for one of the next tasks, which is the presentational. So if you want to move on, which is right here, the presentational. So now building off this idea of you write this paragraph where they were giving advice to somebody who wants one of these jobs. They then listen to a song that talks about careers. Both Danielle and Braden have done this activity when they were my students. So they listen to a song that talks about careers, and and they end up, you know, choosing 3 of the careers. They have to write about why they like, you know, what is interesting to them about this career. And then in the final one, they do what they did, what we scaffolded. They give advice, they choose the one that they would like most, and they give advice to another person. And also last module's target grammar was comparatives. So we're building on that module by having them reinforce the comparatives, okay? And then the final, and then the interpersonal, which is trickier nowadays, and that'll be one of your questions, is to have them use Flipgrid, and they did a job interview with each other. And that's what I'll be watching over the weekend. So they had to post in a discussion board that I made on Brightspace one of the jobs that they found from the interpretive activity. So they posted that, and then they would choose one of those jobs off the discussion board and do a mock interview. And I had it so that each student has to do one interview as the interviewer and one interview as the interviewee. So, you know, when one chance you have to be the candidate, and the other one you have to do the interview, okay? And like I said, we'll see how that went. This is the hardest part for me is figuring out interpersonals in this kind of online and distance space we're in. And that's going to be one of your discussion questions. So, you know, how do you assess interpersonal communication in a distant classroom? And what kinds of realia would make good input for interpretive assessment? So, you know, I gave you tons of examples, but what can you think of that would be good input for interpretive assessment at the levels that you teach? I should add into that. Okay? And that is my presentation. Thank you all very much.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to open the breakout rooms, and I hope it'll mix us up a little bit. It usually does. Yeah, we'll discuss these questions about, I think these are really important questions: interpersonal communication in a distant classroom and realia. So we'll do the same thing and kind of share what we've done and share ideas.
Zoom.
I know.
The magic of Zoom.
They should be coming back. I hope.
Megan is probably there too.
Here they come. All right, welcome back. Almost everyone is joining us again. Okay, great. So we'll move on to the third part. Thank you, Ben, for that. It was really, really great, very informative. And I think a lot of us do kind of parts of IPA, but are not maybe quite as deliberate with the structure and so on. So this is great to see. Elyse is going to talk about the portfolio, so I'll turn it over to you.
Do you mind to change the slides, or do you want me to do this?
I don't mind changing the slides. Just tell me when.
Okay. So portfolio. Do you share the screen? Did you?
Do you all see my screen?
I don't.
Oh, sorry. Let me share it again. I think it stopped sharing. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so to be very honest, I am far from an expert with portfolio. I just used it a long time ago, and then I wanted to implement again at Vanderbilt, and but I was not very sure how I wanted to implement it. So I did a 5-week intensive workshop this summer with Carla, which is a center at University of Minnesota. And so I'm just like giving you what I learned. And it's brainstorming, and I'm starting to implementing in lower lower level division French. So portfolio is a compilation of materials that exemplifies students' learning and skills. It promotes student-centered instruction because that's really responsible. I'm sorry, I'm super tired. I'm start to blah. Really, the portfolio are a document that students is responsible for. You just scaffold, but they are the ones who pick and select what they want to use as evidence of their learning. And so it requires students to reflect on their learning and monitor their learning development and language achievements. Oh, I don't have the, could you like, Silke, please?
Next slide.
No, yeah, well, the following part. So there are a lot of studies on portfolio, and I will be happy to share my resources, my bibliography if you want to. But the study have identified two factors that impact academic achievement. It's goal setting and self-regulated learning. So the goal setting is really part of the teacher, who provide the tools for students to say, hey, what do you want to achieve at the end of the chapter, at the end of the week, at the end of the day, at the end of the semester, at the end of the program, and helping them to have realistic goals and how you will achieve this goal and find the evidence to show that you did. So the students at the beginning mostly are often lost in the process, but then they realize exactly what it means, what it entails, and so they start to self-regulating and start to work in order to achieve these goals. So Clark in 2013, which was her PhD dissertation, say goal settings improve student performance and enhance achievement by allocating attention, activating effort, increasing persistence and motivation, which is in turn leads to the development of self-regulation skills. So it became more than just like an assessment. It becomes really like something you want to show, and so I'm much more engaged in portfolios. Oh, move on, please. So I will show you 3 different examples of portfolios that can be implemented in classrooms. The first one is called the diary portfolio. How you pronounce? Yeah.
Diary.
Sorry.
Diary.
Diary portfolio. And so it's, as you see, the entry is by dates. Okay, so you can say, well, day 1, I did that, day 2, I did that, day 3, I did that, or week 1, week 2, it depends of how you want to present it. So the student posts a sample of a work they did and linked a reflective discourse, a reflective writing next to it. Why they choose that? The learners can track their learning across the progress, so they can see, like, if it's daily, for example, they can really see the progress they do. And then it works well with young learners, especially really used in K-12 and even like K-6, because it's very basic and it's daily. So the student can say, hey, I did that today in classroom, and show the parents, for example. In her settings at Vanderbilt or at the college settings, for the lower division course, I think we can do that per week and have the students, hey, reflect, what did you learn? So the objective, the learning objective for this week was blah, blah, blah. What did you learn and how do you show what you learned? What was the work you did this week, or the activities that was well useful to achieve this objective learning objective. I'm very tired. Could you move on, please, Silke? The second example is categorical portfolio. So here the entries as by category. So you can have category and you can have subcategories. So the third example, for example, is like category environment, and then the student can show environment through climate, environment through architecture, environment through, I don't know, sustainability and stuff like this. So the student posts a sample of work and a reflective discourse as well. Learners can decide how they want to think about the learning. So it's not about daily, but it's more about, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about food. I want to talk about the clothes. It works well to share across time and content. They can go back and forth during the semester. And it works well to reflect on different skills and in cultural exploration. So if they want to say, hey, I want to talk about my writing, what was the categories that really show off my writing? And it can be about food, it can be about a letter of a recommendation you did in Benjamin class, something like that. For her settings, I can see that at the end of a chapter or at the end of a modules, a learner could reflect on the activities that were the most useful to improve language abilities or intercultural competence or multiliteracy skills, meaning media literacy, information literacy, and other skills they also learn in language classrooms. Next slide, please, Silke. And finally, the last example, it's a showcase portfolio. And so the students share the best of the best. They show off. I can see that at the end of a semester or at the end of a program, for example. It allows reflective practice. The students say, hey, I want to show my writing. Which writing piece proof my learning in or my competence, and they have like go through all the writing during the semester and pick, and I think it could be very interesting to see what they pick. It helps learners to create and reflect on what they consider their best work after looking at different pieces of evidence, and it works well to share at the end of the course of a program, as I said. I can see lower and upper division in her department, but also cross-disciplinarity in this case. And I was thinking, that's my goal actually, it's to implement that in French and to create an opportunity for students to do that as an immersion, for the immersion program, for the immersion project they have to do anyway for Vanderbilt. So the learner could reflect on the language development and achievement and gain the intercultural competence they did and show the way they did it. Next slide, please. So why I decided to do e-portfolio? Because we have a Brightspace, and in Brightspace we already have a tool implemented. I didn't use it yet, but I watch a lot of tutorials and it seems very easy to do. So students can really have different tools of choosing the items, creating the presentation. And for the final presentation, they really have a lot of templates, and it's all embedded on Brightspace, which is good for FERPA and access to any of their courses and work they did. And it looks like a website or a blog. So it looks very professional for me and rewarding for students, I think, as a final, like a showcase final work. Silke? Thank you. And you also have the online existing tool provided by the Center for Applied Second Language Studies at the University of Oregon. It's called LenguaFolio. It's online. It has a cost. It's $2 per student, but it's very scaffold already, and they're built on 3 components. You have the passport, the learner's academic background. So the learners talk about his background. So he put his diploma, certificate, anything that he learned, he has as academic. The second component is the biography of the learner. So we talk about language background and the can-do self-assessment statement that they pick, they choose, which can-do statements they want to achieve. And finally, they put the samples of learners' work. So there are really 3 components, and giving this all LinguaFolio online portfolio. You have a lot of examples also online, and you can also go to the Center for Applied the Cashless. They have a lot of resources, and you can look at it and explore if you are interested. Also, if you are interested, I will be very open to have a collaboration with other faculty or graduate students who will be interested to implement that in their course. Like for the immersion program, for example, like more like in the broad way of doing this for if we have students who learn English, French and German, for example, or French and Spanish, or German and Spanish, and have this portfolio they can like build on about language learning. So email me if you are interested to brainstorm with me. And I'm piloting in my own sections this semester. So at the end of the semester, I hope I have more input to give. Voila. Thank you. So yeah, it's your turn. Could you envision implementing portfolios in your course, department, or program? What will be the benefits, the challenges, and the obstacles?
Okay, so we will break out into our groups again and discuss.
I will join. I need to drink some water.
Oh yeah, I understand. Sorry, I feel like I'm like doing this kind of chaotically. It's different than what I'm used to doing.
No, that's fine. It's just like I
fine, though.
To speak. I'm super tired, so I feel like.
No, it's okay. No, it was good. It was fine. It was great. I think, oh my gosh, yeah, it's so good that we're doing breakout rooms because otherwise it would get very long.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah, good. Great. So we want to use this last time for your questions or suggestions or discussion, anything at all that you'd like to ask or bring up or suggest here on the topic of assessment. Even something, that came up in the breakout rooms that you found particularly useful or new that you'd like to share with all of us.
We talked about the portfolio, and that was new to me. IPA I've looked at, but I got some more insight in it, and having to deal with COVID gave me new appreciation for it and new ways of looking at it. But the portfolio is different for us. We talked about that a whole bunch recently in our last group. Who it would be great for? People taking language requirements, maybe people who are going to major, maybe more people who want to go to grad school, even maybe more. I don't know.
Yeah, in our group, we talked about the portfolio as kind of actually something that could be used outside of a course context, but kind of for the majors at the end, as kind of an exit. You have to do the SACS assessment, for instance. It would be great to do that.
Yeah, like a language journey, like the students like turn around and look and see this.
Yeah.
I like what I did in this context and in this course, and even like cross discipline. I can feel like a student in business and in French, for example, a student who take French for business with Natalie and also major in business can say, hey, in this course of business, I learned that. And in the French, it's like reinforced by doing this. And I think it would be very great as a capstone or project or for going to the job market.
What other questions or things you'd like to bring up from any of the discussions?
Well, actually, I have a question for Ben. Ben, when you select authentic materials, do you always think about your IPA and okay, with this material, like with this video, with this promotional ads, I can do for presentational this and for interpretive this and for, do you like automatically have this?
I do, yes, but I've been doing it for a while, so it's something that, happens. Also, the textbook that we use has historically had similar, like they've had, they're not authentic materials, but they'll have like made, textbook, it's like this is a picture of this is a TV schedule. And it's like, well, why don't we do the activity with that? But actually I'll go online and look at that. And so, there's definitely some things that were inspired by the text that we use. Or that I use, it's two of us, but, and then there's also but in terms of like using stuff, I really do. And I also think about, and this is why I like one thing I'm liking about the distance experience is like using websites that you would actually use. Like rather than it be something like, you might actually look for a job in Brazil someday. You might want to know, you might look at a supermarket to see what's on sale that week. That's next. Don't tell anybody in my class, but that is next week's. Is they'll be looking at like supermarket circulars, one from Brazil, one from Portugal, and one from Angola, and then what's on sale, which foods have different names, things like that. And
do you use? I might ask you already, but do you use Perusal? Because Perusal, you can explore.
Well, after the workshop this week, I am going to do it with them next week. So yeah, the video actually, so I'm showing a video where an Angolan woman and a Brazilian woman, it's a Brazilian woman's YouTube channel and she was working in Angola and they cook a dish together. So I'm going to have them I have some specific questions, but then it's what is X ingredient called on one side of the Atlantic and on the other, and things like that. So yeah,
sweet,
great. This food topic is making everyone hungry, probably. Other questions? Anything you want to bring up? Comments?
And we didn't talk about the rubric on Brightspace, but they're really useful and easy to use if you don't yet. We really suggest you to use a rubric on Brightspace. It's easy to create and then facilitate for grading.
Yeah, especially helpful if you're supervising TAs and you put the rubric in all of their courses and then you're sure that kind of everyone's evaluating in the same way. That's also really important where, we don't have a test where we're -1 for this, right? So we want to be sure that everyone's evaluating in a similar way and that the students know what to expect.
Oh, and actually something I can add with portfolio. With the class I taught, I was telling them in our smaller group, my composition class involved a portfolio at the end, the past 2 semesters. And what I had been doing, because there were video and audio recordings as well as written texts, I created a box folder for each student, and that is how they submitted it. And that's another way. Now that I know about the Brightspace portfolio, that will be how we do it in the future. But if you're ever working with another LMS that doesn't have Brightspace, or you're teaching independent courses that don't, and you're not at a university that has an LMS subscription, you still can figure out ways to do that kind of thing, in other words.
Yeah, what I like with Brightspace is the way that the FERPA, it's under FERPA, and so the student is covered and the work is covered.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just to end for today, we wanted to be sure everyone knows about the next workshop here. We have a guest zooming in to join us. Megan Monti, the director of the Center for Applied Linguistics in Washington, D.C., talking about developing and using speaking assessments for effective language teaching. So mark your calendars. We hope you'll join us for that. And thank you very much for your active participation. I know I learned a lot, and I think that, it's always useful to share ideas in these workshops. So thank you very much. Choose your language for the thank you, and have a good weekend, everyone.
It's good to see everybody.
Yeah.
Great
Great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Have a good weekend, everybody.